welcome back. Today we're looking at the Iliad, and we're looking at Book 11. After a long night filled with adventures of its own, we begin the next day with a big epic battle scene. But before we get into the action, let's look at the characters. In this scene, we're going to see a lot of our favorite heroes doing what they do best, which is breaking heads and spearing people. And we'll see their battle prowess as we have in many of the books in the past. Notably, we see Agamemnon, who does a whole lot of massive work on the battlefield. We return to Diomedes, also Odysseus, also Ajax. All of these guys are going to show their stuff on the battlefield. Nestor reprises his role as the fighter/elderly advisor. And we have a couple of other characters who get a moment. Eurypylus is another big fighter who has a moment to not only jump into the fray, but also he's going to be one of the voices of hopelessness towards the end of the book as the tide really keeps turning against the Greeks. We also get Machaon, who we saw way back in Book 4 as the healer for the Greeks, and because he is their main medic, he is a very important character. Finally, we're going to look at Patroclus again, who of course is the close friend and relative of Achilles, who has been sitting out along with Achilles this entire time, and this is the moment when Patroclus is beginning to feel bad for all of his Greek buddies. We'll see him showing some empathy here. So let's talk about what happens in this book. The day breaks and Zeus sends strife down among the Greeks, stirring them up for battle. Both armies rally and charge into the fray, but this time most of the gods are sitting out. Zeus has kind of, again, laid down the law, and the gods have learned to take a step back for now. The battle really kicks off as Agamemnon takes the lead, and he starts really tearing the place up. He's killing man after man after man, and we see how ruthless he is. We've seen that in the past. He shows no mercy. He obliterates everyone in his path. And honestly, his killing spree goes on for a few pages, to the point that Hector is beginning to get a little nervous. But Zeus sends the goddess Iris, the messenger goddess, down to Achilles to give him some reassurance. He tells him not to approach Agamemnon directly, but wait until a key moment when Agamemnon is going to be injured. And at that moment, Hector can make his charge. But soon as spear or bowshot wounds the king and Atrides mounts his chariot once again, then I will hand Hector the power to kill and kill, till he cuts his way to the beached ships, and the sun sinks and the blessed darkness sweeps across the earth. And so Iris swoops down and repeats the message verbatim, that repetition kind of idea. And so Hector holds back, and Agamemnon keeps slashing through the army until finally this one guy, whose name is Machaon, stabs him with a spear. Machaon has just watched his brother be slaughtered by Agamemnon, and so he manages to get a stroke in from Agamemnon's blind side. However, he doesn't get to celebrate very long, because as he goes to retrieve his brother's body, Agamemnon, even though wounded, manages to lop his head off. Agamemnon charges back into battle, but very quickly realizes that his injury is too intense for him to keep fighting. He has to jump back in his chariot and get off the field for now. Hector sees that as his signal he's been waiting for, and he rallies the men and they charge forward, and they are about to really break into the Greek camp. Now, things might be bad for the Greeks, but they still have some pretty impressive heroes, and Odysseus and Diomedes do another tag team to try to repel and rebuff Hector. Now there would have been havoc, irreversible chaos, fleeing bands of Achaeans flung back on their ships, if Odysseus had not shouted to Diomedes, "What's wrong with us? Forgetting our battle fury! Come here, old friend, stand by me! What humiliation, if Hector with that flashing helmet takes our ships!" Powerful Diomedes took his challenge quickly. "I'll stand and fight by God, and take the worst, but little joy it will bring our comrades now. Zeus, the king of the clouds, has pitched victory on the Trojans, not for us." Diomedes has begun to get the point. Zeus is turned against them. But the two of them start slaughtering all those Trojans around them, and Hector notices them, and Hector begins to charge the two of them. Diomedes throws a spear at Hector and hits him in the head. The helmet manages to protect him this time, but it does definitely stun Hector and knock him back. Sprinting a long way back, downfield and fast, Hector rejoined his men, and sinking onto one knee, propped himself with a strong hand planted against the earth, and the world went black as night across his eyes. But soon as Tydides followed up with his spear, tracking its flight far down across the front where it stuck in the sand, Hector caught his breath and, boarding his car, drove for his own main force. As he hurtled clear of the dark fates of death, Diomedes shouting after him, shaking his spear. "Now again you've escaped your death, you dog! But a good close brush with death it was, I'd say. Now again your Phoebus Apollo pulls you through, the one you pray to, wading into our storm of spears. We'll fight again. I'll finish you off next time, if one of the gods will only urge me on as well. But now I'll go for the others, anyone I can catch." And so Diomedes gets to return the taunts that he got a few books back. And this time it's Hector running back for his lines. But Diomedes' glory is short-lived because at this point, Paris shoots an arrow which hits him through the foot, punching right through his foot into the ground. Paris crows about it for a moment, and Diomedes shouts some taunts back. He says, you just scratched my foot. Let's do one-on-one battle, I'd totally destroy you. But very quickly we realize that this injury is actually serious. In fact, it is a depressing moment, because Diomedes with an injured foot can't fight. And after yanking the arrow out of his foot, he realizes how injured he is and has to turn his chariot and return back to the lines. Diomedes, tragically, has been sidelined for the rest of the book. Man, there's nothing worse than when one of the best characters gets taken out right in the middle of the book. I'm looking at you, Romeo and Juliet. Odysseus, meanwhile, is now alone. He had Diomedes right at his back, and when the two of them are side by side, man, they were a powerhouse. But without Diomedes by his side, Odysseus' confidence begins to wane. He glances backwards, wondering whether he should start retreating or whether he should stay and hold his ground. And at that moment, he basically gets piled on. The Trojans just try to completely cover him. But he's fighting left and right, all around him, killing lots of people. In the middle of this guy named Socus manages to stab Odysseus in the ribs. And although Athena keeps Odysseus from getting killed, because he's her favorite, Odysseus does take a significant injury to his side. He pulls the spear out and kills Socus, but then looks down and realizes he's bleeding heavily. And the Trojans, seeing him wounded, really press their attack even harder. Ajax and Menelaus have to come to his rescue, Ajax with his giant shield. And as Ajax covers them, Menelaus and Odysseus limp backwards off the field. Meanwhile, Hector is over in the area where Nestor and Agamemnon are fighting, and the battling is intense, when all of a sudden Paris takes another excellent shot and knocks out Machaon. And this is a moment that absolutely terrifies the Greeks, because Machaon is their healer. With him out, they're going to be at a huge disadvantage. They can't lose their doctor. So Nestor pulls Machaon aboard his chariot, and the two of them dash off for the boats. At this point, we've lost Agamemnon, we've lost Diomedes, we've lost Odysseus, we've lost Machaon, and Hector is still doing all this damage, but he actually doesn't want to face Ajax man-to-man because of how their fight went, I guess, earlier in the book. But even though Ajax doesn't have to face Hector, Zeus still pushes him back, pouring the army of Trojans against him. And so he's all alone out there with his big shield, battling and slowly being pressed backwards. At this point, Eurypylus rushes up to help Ajax, doesn't want to leave him alone, to give him a little bit of backup. But just as he gets up there and begins to do some work, Paris takes another shot and hits Eurypylus in the thigh. And as he staggers back, he shouts for the Greeks to please help save Ajax. Ajax is all alone. We can't lose him. Meanwhile, we cut back to the ships, where Achilles is sitting back in his camp, kind of watching and seeing how things are going, and he sees Nestor's chariot tearing across the plain, running back for the ships. And so he nudges Patroclus and says, hey, it looks like somebody was injured. Was that Machaon? Go check and see who that was. So Patroclus heads off to the main camp to Nestor's tent to see what's going on. And when he comes in, he confirms, oh, it is Machaon. Oh, that's terrible that our healer, our doctor, would be wounded like this. Sure hope he pulls through. Patroclus says, yeah, Achilles just sent me to see who was injured, so I'll report back to him. And Nestor replies and says, why does he even care? He's just letting all of his friends die. We just got all of our best heroes knocked out, basically in a matter of pages. Is he just gonna wait until we're all dead and all the boats are burned? He's really gonna do that? And then Nestor's like, if only I were young and spry again. Why, back in my day, and then he goes on for several pages telling the story of all the feats he used to do when he was really young and strong. But as he finishes his story, Nestor reminds Patroclus of when Achilles and Patroclus were recruited for this job. How both of their fathers stood there and gave them advice. Now, we've heard a little bit about the advice of Peleus for Achilles. Odysseus talked about that back a few books ago. But now we hear the advice of Patroclus' father, Menoetius. And Menoetius told Patroclus, apparently, although Achilles is your better in that he is a descendant of a god, He may have more glory than you, and yet he listens to you. My child, Achilles is nobler than you with his immortal blood, but you are older. He has more power than you by far, but give him sound advice, guide him even in battle. Achilles will listen to you, for his own good. So the old man told you. You've forgotten, Nestor says. Patroclus, you have the power to influence Achilles. None of us could do it, but you have the power. Now's your chance. You can see the disaster going on here. Only you can turn things by making Achilles change his mind. But even now, late as it is, you could tell your Achilles all this, and your fiery friend might listen, who knows? With the gods' help, you might just rouse him now, bring his fighting spirit round at last. The persuasion of a comrade has its powers. But if down deep some prophecy makes him balk, some doom his noble mother revealed to him from Zeus, at least let Achilles send Patroclus into battle. Let the whole Myrmidon army follow your command. You might bring some light of victory to our Argives, and let him give you his own fine armor to wear in war, so the Trojans might take you for him, Patroclus. Yes, hold off from attack, and Achaea's fighting sons get second wind. Exhausted as they are, breathing room in war is all too brief. You're fresh, unbroken. They're bone weary from battle. You could roll those broken Trojans back to Troy, clear our ships and shelters. Here's an idea. If you can't get Achilles to fight for us, what if you fight for us? And what if you put on Achilles' armor? So as you ride out into battle, all the Trojans look up there and they see the armor of Achilles riding towards them. That'll terrify them. That will give all the Greeks a moment to catch their breath and scare the Trojans back, turning the tide of battle. It's all we need. And this strikes a chord in Patroclus. He has sympathy for his fellow Greeks. And so he turns to return to Achilles. On the way, he runs into Eurypylus, who is limping from the arrow in his thigh. And he says, "Hey, Eurypylus, is there any hope?" And Eurypylus says, "No, not a chance. Help me back to my ship and give me a little first aid. But no, there's no hope for our army. We're dead." And so Patroclus takes a quick detour and helps Eurypylus to his ship and gives him some first aid, binding up his leg. What happens as the Trojans continue to press their attack, we'll find out in Book 12. Okay, let's look at some of the key features of Book 11. First of all, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is the personification of strife entering into the battlefield. Chaos, strife, and war are all abstracts, but in this book they frequently come in as actual characters. At the very beginning of the book as well, we get this sequence of Agamemnon putting on his armor. The moment of strapping on the armor is rather significant and shows up several times in the book. It's a moment to show off the hero in all of his glory, and also demonstrate his power and strength before he even gets into the fight. We'll see some other important arming sequences later in the book. There are, of course, many excellent epic similes, like this one. Think how a lion, mauling the soft, weak young of a running deer, clamped in his massive jaws, cracks their backbones with a snap. He's stormed in, invading the lair to tear their tender hearts out. And the mother doe, even if she's close by, what can she do to save her fawns? She's helpless. Terrible trembling racks her body too. And suddenly off she bounds through the glades and the thick woods, drenched in sweat, leaping clear of the big cat's pounce. So, not a single Trojan could save those two from death. They fled themselves before the Argive charge. This book also includes another example of the invocation of the muse. In line 253 in Fagel's translation, it says, "Sing to me now, you muses who hold the halls of Olympus. Who was the first to go up against King Agamemnon? Who of the Trojans, or famous Trojan allies?" The poet again invokes the muse, looking for inspiration to tell his story. I mentioned earlier the repetition, as characters will repeat things verbatim, and there are several instances throughout this book as characters are being killed and slaughtered on the battlefield where it pauses just at the moment of a character dying and zooms in and gives you a chance to deeply sympathize with them by providing details about their life outside of this, to underscore that theme that war is ugly and cruel and horrific. For example, when Agamemnon kills this man whose name is Iphidamus, it says, And there he dropped, and slept the sleep of bronze, poor soldier, striving to help his fellow Trojans, far from his wedded wife, his new bride. No joy had he known from her for all his gifts, the full 100 oxen he gave her on the spot, then promised 1,000 head of goats and sheep from the boundless herds he'd rounded up himself. So we have this moment where there's this man who, loved this woman, and he was willing to give this huge amount of wealth to be able to marry her, and he marries her, and then he gets slaughtered on the battlefield. That idea repeats over and over and over again, the loss of life, and how every life takes something away from the world. That's it for this time. We'll see what happens as the Trojans continue to press their attack in Book 12. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or watch another video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.